My 9-year-old daughter stared at me and said, "Sorry, Mommy." I promised him I wouldn't tell you where we go. I instantly knew something was off. My daughter had never lied to me, but now she was covering for her bus driver, a literal adult man who was practically a stranger. It didn't sit well with me, and it wasn't the only thing. I watched the bus take a sharp left onto a different street that morning instead of the usual right turn, and for 3 days straight, the bus took that route, even in the afternoon during drop-off. At first I thought it was in my head. My child never brought it up, but when I asked my neighbors and other parents, they had no clue about the route change either. My son cried when I pushed for answers, one of the parents told me. That's when I decided to follow the bus myself the next morning. I made sure to stay 3 cars behind. Nothing else was unusual until the bus turned to a street in the opposite direction of the school. This route wasn't just any route. It was the same road where the city recovered 4 kidnapped children, just 3 months earlier. And the suspect? Still at large. I grew even more nervous watching the bus stop at the apartment complex next door covered with graffiti and broken windows. Then, a little kid ran out from behind a dumpster and quickly jumped on the bus like he'd been hiding there. I sent a picture of the bus in the area to the other parents, and my phone instantly blew up with panicked messages, begging me to make sure the bus got to school safely. It did. Unfortunately, it backfired. One of the parents contacted the principal, and suddenly all the kids on the bus became even more secretive. Conversations stopped when adults walked by, and my daughter kept deleting messages she had with her friends like she was worried I'd find something. But I was too worried not to know. "Young lady, you better tell me what's going on. Is the driver doing something bad to you or any of the kids?" I demanded. "Mommy, no, never. He's a nice man," she said, her voice shaking as she fought back tears. I nodded and pulled her into a hug. "But honey, if you don't tell me what's going on, the nice man will get in trouble," I said softly. She looked at me with a worried expression, then nodded, finally telling me the truth. My friend Isaac from PE said a scary man followed him to school and followed him home. I said take the bus like me, but he said there's no bus. So I told my bus driver to help Isaac, she explained. "I'm sorry, Mommy. The older kids said not to tell the teachers or parents or the bus driver will be in trouble. But Mommy, he's a nice man." I stood there speechless. It was shocking. So much so that I had to confront the bus driver at school alongside other parents to see if it was true. The driver, George, looked tired but not surprised. "Yes, I've been making unauthorized stops for 2 weeks, he admitted. "Why not tell the principal about it?" one parent asked. But the answer was chilling. "The man following Isaac," he whispered, "is the same man who kidnaps kids in the area, and I saw his face once. It's the principal." I stood there frozen outside the school with the other parents after George said those words about the principal. My hands shook so hard I had to shove them in my jacket pockets. Every parent around me had the same look on their face, like someone just told us the ground beneath our feet wasn't solid anymore. A woman next to me made a small gasping sound and covered her mouth. Another parent, a dad I'd seen at pickup before, took a step back like he needed physical distance from what he just heard. George stood there looking at all of us with tired eyes, waiting for someone to say something, but nobody could find words. My brain kept trying to process what he'd just told us, that the man who ran our children's school, who smiled at them every morning and knew all their names, was the same man who'd been following Isaac. A parent named Chloe Harrington, who I recognized from the fall festival, pulled out her phone so fast I barely saw her move. She started typing notes with her thumbs while asking George questions in a steady voice that made me grateful someone could think clearly right now. She asked him what dates he saw the principal near the apartment complex. George said it started about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. She asked what time of day. George said early morning, around the time kids would be walking to bus stops. She asked if he was sure it was the principal's car. George nodded and described a silver Toyota with a dent in the back bumper and a school parking permit in the window. Chloe kept typing everything he said, her fingers moving across her phone screen without hesitation. I wanted to hug her for being so organized when the rest of us just stood there in shock. George explained he first noticed the principal's car parked near the apartment complex on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago. He thought it was weird but didn't think too much about it at first. Then he saw the same car again 2 days later, this time driving slowly past the bus stop where Isaac usually waited. George said something about it felt wrong, the way the car crept along instead of just driving past normally. The third time he saw it, the principal was sitting in the parked car watching the area where kids gathered for the bus. George said he made eye contact with the principal through the car window, and the principal drove away fast. That's when George knew something bad was happening. He wanted to report it to someone, but who would believe a bus driver over the principal? The principal had worked at the school for 8 years, and everyone loved him. George figured if he went to the district office or the police with no proof, they'd think he was crazy or making trouble. So instead, he just started picking Isaac up early from behind the dumpster, trying to keep the kids safe without getting himself fired for breaking route rules. One of the other parents asked why George didn't at least tell the teachers. George said he was afraid word would get back to the principal, and then Isaac would be in more danger. He also worried the principal might figure out George was onto him and do something to stop the unauthorized pickups. The whole situation felt impossible, like there was no good choice that didn't put someone at risk. We all agreed right there in the parking lot that we couldn't confront the principal directly. If he really was dangerous, if he really was the person who'd been kidnapping kids in our area, then tipping him off could make everything worse. He might run, or worse, He might do something to Isaac or another child before we could stop him. Chloe said we needed to go straight to the police with everything we knew. She said we had enough information now between George's observations, the route changes, the photos I'd taken, and all our kids talking about keeping secrets. Everyone nodded in agreement, even the parents who'd been skeptical before. The dad who'd stepped back earlier said he'd come to the police station too if it would help. Another mom said she'd been defending the principal to other parents just yesterday, and now she felt sick about it. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to meet at the police station in 2 hours so we could each go home and write down our observations first. Chloe said documentation was critical, and we needed to have our facts straight before talking to the police. I drove home with my daughter sitting in the back seat asking questions I didn't know how to answer. I tried to act normal, but my mind raced with fear and anger. How long had this been going on? How many kids had the principal been watching? Were there other children in danger right now while we drove home like it was a regular day? My daughter asked if George was in trouble for picking up Isaac. I looked at her in the rearview mirror and promised we were going to make sure the right person got in trouble instead. She seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to looking out the window. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and focused on getting us home safely. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and pen, trying to write down everything in the right order. I started with the first day I noticed the route change, wrote down the date and time as close as I could remember. Then I described following the bus, the turn onto the wrong street, arriving at the apartment complex with the graffiti and broken windows. I wrote about seeing Isaac run out from behind the dumpster and jump on the bus. I documented every conversation with other parents, every weird thing my daughter had said, every time the kids got quiet when adults came near. I took screenshots of every text message I'd sent to the parent group, every photo of the bus in that neighborhood. My phone had timestamps on everything which felt important. I wrote down George's confession word for word as best as I could remember. I noted that he said he saw the principal's face, that he specifically identified the principal as the man following Isaac. My hand cramped from writing so much, but I kept going because every detail might matter. Chloe called me that evening while I was making dinner. She said she'd created a shared document where all the parents could add their observations and concerns. She used to work in project management before having kids, and she knew how to organize information so it made sense. She'd already set up sections for timeline, witness statements, evidence, and questions for the police. She sent me the link and I added my notes right away. I could see other parents were already adding their information too. One parent wrote about her son crying when she asked about the bus route. Another parent noted that his daughter had been deleting text messages for the past week. Someone else documented that their child had nightmares about bad men for the first time ever. Seeing it all written out in one place made the pattern obvious and terrifying. I called the non-emergency police line after my daughter went to bed. I tried to explain the situation as calmly as I could, even though my voice shook. The operator asked me to slow down and start from the beginning. I told her about the bus route changes, the unauthorized stop, the apartment complex where kidnapped children had been found, the bus driver's confession about seeing the principal following a student. The operator's tone changed from routine to serious. She said she was noting everything I said, and a detective would contact me within 24 hours. 24 hours felt like forever when a child predator might be walking the school halls tomorrow morning. I asked if there was any way to make it faster. She said she understood my concern, but this was the standard process, and the detective would call as soon as possible. I thanked her and hung up, feeling frustrated that bureaucracy moved so slowly when kids were in danger. That night, I barely slept. I checked my phone constantly, even though I knew the detective wouldn't call until morning at the earliest. Every sound outside made me jump. I kept thinking about Isaac hiding behind a dumpster, scared of a man in a suit who knew his name. I thought about my daughter and all her friends keeping this terrifying secret because they were trying to protect George. I thought about the principal walking around school tomorrow, smiling at children and nobody except us knowing what he really was. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and made tea because lying in bed wasn't working. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark and went through the shared document again, reading every parent's observations. The next morning, I installed a dash cam in my car that I'd ordered with overnight shipping. The package arrived at 6 a.m. and I had it mounted and running by 7. If I was going to keep following the bus or driving my daughter to the school myself, I wanted everything recorded. I needed video evidence in case we saw the principal near the school or near Isaac's neighborhood. I needed proof that would hold up if this went to court. I tested the camera to make sure it was working properly, adjusting the angle so it captured the road ahead and the sides. The camera had a timestamp feature that would mark every second of footage with the date and time. I felt slightly better knowing I had this tool now, like I was doing something concrete to protect the kids instead of just worrying. At 9 the next morning, I sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee when my phone buzzed with an email from the school district. The subject line read, "Transportation route updates," and I opened it immediately. The email talked about temporary routing adjustments for operational efficiency and mentioned ongoing reviews of transportation protocols. I read it 3 times looking for any mention of safety concerns or unauthorized stops or the actual reason George changed his route. Nothing. Just corporate language that made it sound like they were optimizing fuel costs or something equally boring. My hands shook as I set down my coffee cup because they were clearly trying to cover up what was really happening. They knew parents were asking questions, and instead of being honest, they sent out this garbage email that said absolutely nothing. I forwarded it to Chloe with a message asking if she got the same thing. She responded within seconds saying yes, and that she was documenting everything the district sent us. An hour later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered it cautiously and heard a woman introduce herself as Detective Valentina from the police department. She said she received my report from the non-emergency line and wanted to discuss the situation in detail. I felt a wave of relief wash over me because finally someone official was paying attention. She asked me to start from the beginning and explain everything I noticed about the bus route changes. I told her about the sharp left turn instead of the usual right, following the bus myself, seeing Isaac run out from behind the dumpster at the apartment complex. She asked specific questions about dates and times and whether I had any photos or videos. I told her about the screenshots I took and the dash cam I just installed. She asked good questions about how many other parents noticed the changes and whether any of the children had mentioned anything unusual. I explained how the kids got more secretive after one parent contacted the principal, and how my daughter finally told me about Isaac being followed. Detective Valentina listened carefully and took notes, and I could tell from her tone that she was taking this seriously. She asked if I knew Isaac's last name or where he lived, and I realized I didn't have that information. She said that was okay, and she would work on identifying him through the school records. Before we hung up, she gave me her direct number and told me to call immediately if I noticed anything else suspicious. I thanked her probably 5 times because having a detective actually investigate made me feel less crazy for being so worried about all this. Right after I hung up with Detective Valentina, my phone dinged with an email from Chloe. She had created a shared document with statements from 5 other parents about the route changes and their children's unusual behavior. I opened it and read through each statement carefully. One parent wrote that her son cried when she asked about the bus and refused to talk about it for 2 days. Another parent noted that his daughter had been deleting text messages for the past week, which was completely unlike her. Someone else documented that their child mentioned kids on the bus had a secret, but wouldn't say what it was. Seeing all the observations written out in one organized document made the pattern impossible to ignore. Chloe had already emailed everything to Detective Valentina and copied me on it. I was amazed at how quickly she pulled this together and how professional it looked. She must have stayed up late getting statements from everyone and organizing them by date. I sent her a text thanking her for doing this, and she replied that we needed to protect these kids no matter what it took. That evening after dinner, I sat down with my daughter at the kitchen table. I told her we needed to talk about some new rules regarding phone messages and secrets. She looked nervous but nodded and put down her tablet to listen. I explained that some secrets are okay, like surprise birthday parties or Christmas presents. But secrets about safety are different, and those kinds of secrets should always be shared with parents even if it might get someone in trouble. I asked her if she understood the difference, and she thought about it for a minute before nodding seriously. She asked if George was going to be okay, and I promised her we were doing everything we could to make sure the right person got in trouble, not him. She seemed satisfied with that answer and gave me a hug before going to her room to do homework. I felt better knowing we had clear rules now about what she should tell me. The next morning, I followed the bus again with my new dash cam recording everything. I stayed back further than before because I didn't want anyone to notice me tailing them. The bus took its usual route toward the apartment complex, and I watched carefully for anything unusual. About 3 blocks from the school, I noticed a dark blue sedan following behind the bus at a distance. My heart started pounding as I grabbed my phone to take screenshots of the dash cam footage. The sedan stayed behind the bus for 3 consecutive blocks, keeping the same distance the whole time. I managed to capture several clear frames showing the car, and in one of them I could see a partial license plate. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone, but I got the screenshot saved. I pulled over as soon as the bus turned into the school lot because I didn't want to get too close. I immediately called Detective Valentina and told her about the sedan. She asked me to send her the dashcam files right away, along with the screenshots showing the partial plate. I emailed everything to her within minutes, and she called me back to confirm she received it. She asked me to note the exact time and location where I spotted the sedan, and said this was helpful evidence. I felt a surge of hope that we were actually building a real case with concrete proof instead of just suspicions and worry. Detective Valentina said she would follow up on the partial plate number and see what she could find out. That evening, Chloe texted me saying Detective Valentina had arranged to meet George at a coffee shop away from the school. I wasn't invited to the meeting, but Chloe said she would keep me updated since she was closer to George through the parent network. She texted me updates throughout the evening saying George was providing detailed information about every time he saw the principal near Isaac's area. He was giving Detective Valentina specific dates and times and descriptions of the principal's car and behavior. Chloe said George seemed tired, but determined to tell everything he knew. About halfway through the meeting, someone else showed up that George had called. Edward Steele introduced himself as George's union representative, and he looked concerned about the whole situation. Chloe texted me that Edward was warning George about the consequences of making unauthorized stops, and how he could lose his job over this. But George told Edward he would rather lose his job than let a kid get kidnapped, and that he stood by his decision to protect Isaac. Chloe added that she wished she could hug George for saying that, because it took real courage to risk his career for a child's safety. I texted back agreeing and saying George was a hero even if the district didn't see it that way. Later that night, Detective Valentina contacted Imogen Ward, who turned out to be Isaac's grandmother and his primary caregiver. Chloe forwarded me the update saying Imogen had agreed to an official police interview. Detective Valentina told Chloe that Isaac had actually mentioned being followed to his grandmother multiple times, but Imogen thought he was making up stories for attention. She felt terrible now realizing he had been telling the truth about a real danger. Detective Valentina was arranging to interview both Imogen and Isaac properly to document everything. The next day, a CPS social worker named Mariah Knowles reached out to Imogen to schedule something called a forensic interview with Isaac. Chloe explained to me that these interviews are special and different from regular conversations. They get recorded and are conducted by specialists who are trained to talk with children about scary situations without leading them or causing more trauma. The questions are very careful and specific, and everything gets documented properly, so it can be used as evidence if needed. Mariah was scheduling the interview for later in the week at a child advocacy center that was set up specifically for these kinds of cases. I felt relieved knowing that professionals were handling this the right way, and that Isaac would be able to tell his story in a safe environment designed for children. That evening, I checked my email before bed and found a message from someone named Cyrus Nolan, with the subject line District Compliance Review. I opened it and felt my stomach drop as I read the formal language warning about unsubstantiated rumors circulating among parents. The email said spreading false information about district employees could result in legal action for defamation and damage to professional reputations. It asked us to stop sharing information immediately and allow proper procedures to unfold without interference. The tone made me angry because it felt like a threat designed to scare us into silence instead of protecting the children. I forwarded the email to Chloe and several other parents from our group, and my phone started ringing within minutes. Chloe called first and said she was setting up a meeting with Cyrus at the district office for the next morning. She told me to bring every piece of evidence I had collected, including the dashcam footage, screenshots, and written timeline. I spent an hour that night organizing everything into a folder on my laptop and printing backup copies, because I wanted to be ready for whatever Cyrus threw at us. The next morning, 6 of us parents showed up at the district office carrying folders and looking determined. Chloe had arranged the meeting for 9 a.m., and we sat in a conference room with uncomfortable chairs and fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. Cyrus walked in wearing a suit and carrying a legal pad, and he looked uncomfortable the moment he saw how many of us had come. We started laying out everything we knew about the principal and the stalking with documents spread across the table. I showed him my dashcam footage of the sedan following the bus and the screenshots with the partial license plate. Another parent presented a timeline of Isaac hiding behind the dumpster and George's unauthorized stops. Chloe had organized witness statements from multiple parents about their children's unusual secrecy and fear. Cyrus kept shifting in his seat and writing notes, but his expression stayed carefully neutral throughout our presentation. He kept saying we needed to be patient and let proper procedures unfold without jumping to conclusions. When we asked if there was an active investigation, he refused to confirm or deny anything, citing personnel privacy and ongoing processes. He warned us again about making accusations that could harm innocent people's careers and reputations. Every response felt like he was reading from a script designed to protect the institution, instead of addressing our concerns about child safety. I asked him directly if he understood that children were in danger, and he gave me a practiced answer about the district, taking all safety matters seriously. The whole meeting felt pointless because Cyrus clearly had orders to contain the situation rather than help us. We left the district office frustrated and worried that nothing would change despite all our evidence. 2 hours later, Chloe texted me that George had been called into the transportation supervisor's office. I called her immediately, and she said the district was placing George on administrative leave pending an investigation into unauthorized route changes. They were assigning a substitute driver to take over the route starting the next day. I felt sick knowing George was punished for protecting Isaac while the principal still had full access to the school and all the children. The district was going after the one person who had actually tried to keep a kid safe instead of dealing with the real threat. I texted back asking what we could do, and Chloe said Edward was already working on George's defense through the union. But it didn't change the fact that George would lose income and possibly his job while the principal faced no consequences yet. I decided right then that I would drive my daughter to the school myself, because I didn't trust a substitute driver who knew nothing about Isaac or the danger he faced. The drive would add 40 minutes to my morning routine between dropping her off and getting to work, but my daughter's safety was worth any inconvenience. I was already exhausted from weeks of stress and worry, but I couldn't risk putting her on a bus with someone who might not notice if something went wrong. That evening, I explained to my daughter that I would be driving her to the school for a while, and she asked if it was because of the scary man. I told her yes, and that we were being extra careful until the police finished their investigation. She seemed okay with that, and said some of her friends were also getting driven by their parents now instead of taking the bus. The next morning, I drove my daughter to the school and pulled into the drop-off line at 7:45. I saw other parents from our group also driving their kids instead of using the bus, and we exchanged worried looks across the parking lot. Nobody talked because we were on the school property where the principal might see us, and we didn't want to cause more problems. I watched my daughter walk into the building with her backpack, and felt a mix of relief and frustration that we had to take these precautions. The principal's car was parked in his usual spot near the front entrance, and seeing it there made my skin crawl, knowing what he had been doing. I drove away feeling like we were all walking on eggshells trying to protect our kids while pretending everything was normal. That afternoon, Chloe called an emergency parent meeting at her house for 6 p.m. I arranged for my daughter to have dinner at a friend's house, so I could attend without worrying about her overhearing scary details. About 15 parents showed up and crowded into Chloe's living room, but the group felt tense from the moment we arrived. Some people were angry about George's suspension and wanted to organize protests at the district office. Others seemed uncertain about whether we were doing the right thing or just causing unnecessary drama. One parent said maybe we should back off and let the police handle everything without parent interference. The meeting got heated fast when a parent I didn't know well stood up and defended the principal as a dedicated educator who would never hurt children. She said we were ruining an innocent man's career based on speculation and paranoia. Another parent immediately argued back that predators count on exactly that kind of trust and disbelief to get away with their crimes. The room divided into two camps, with some people nodding in agreement with the defense, and others getting angry at the suggestion we should ignore the warning signs. Voices got louder and people talked over each other trying to make their points. Chloe tried to moderate, but the group was too worked up to listen. Someone accused us of being helicopter parents who saw danger everywhere, and another person fired back asking if they would rather wait until a child got kidnapped to take action. I left the meeting early feeling isolated and unsure if we were doing the right thing. The drive home felt long, and I kept replaying the arguments in my head, wondering if we really were overreacting. But then I remembered Isaac hiding behind that dumpster waiting for the bus and my daughter's scared face when she finally told me the truth about what was happening. I remembered George risking his job to protect a child, and the principal's car following the bus route. Those memories reminded me why we had to keep pushing forward even when other parents doubted us. We weren't trying to ruin anyone's career or cause drama. We were trying to protect children from a real threat that the district seemed more interested in covering up than addressing. The next day, Chloe texted me that Detective Valentina had set up surveillance along the bus route and near Isaac's apartment complex. She couldn't tell us specific details about the surveillance operation, but she confirmed they were taking the investigation seriously and actively gathering evidence. Knowing the police were watching made me feel slightly better, but I also knew surveillance took time, and we still had no guarantee anything would come of it. I kept driving my daughter to the school and watching for any signs of the principal near our neighborhood or the bus stops. 3 days went by with me checking my phone every hour and watching for any sign the principal might be near our neighborhood. On Thursday afternoon, I pulled into the school pickup line at 2:45 and parked 3 cars back from the entrance. Parents stood in clusters near the sidewalk waiting for dismissal, some checking phones while others chatted about weekend plans. Then I saw him walk out the front doors in his usual suit and tie, carrying his briefcase like any normal day at work. He stopped near the flagpole and smiled at a group of kindergartners walking past with their teacher. One little girl waved at him and he waved back, his face friendly and warm like a grandfather greeting his grandkids. My stomach twisted watching him act so normal and kind when I knew what he'd been doing to Isaac. He called out something cheerful to a parent walking by, and they laughed together about something I couldn't hear. The whole scene looked so ordinary and safe that for a second I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake accusing him. But then I remembered Isaac hiding behind that dumpster and the dark blue sedan following the bus route, and I felt sick knowing this man was still around children every single day. The dismissal bell rang and kids started flooding out of the building. I watched the principal high-five a boy running past and ruffle another kid's hair in a friendly way. Every gesture looked caring and appropriate, which somehow made it worse because predators are supposed to look scary and obvious, not like beloved school leaders everyone trusts. My daughter came out with her backpack and I waved her over to the car, keeping my eyes on the principal the whole time. He never looked in my direction, but I felt exposed standing there in the parking lot where he could easily see me. I buckled my daughter into her seat and drove away faster than necessary, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. That night around 9:30, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message said I should back off and stop causing trouble for good people who were just trying to do their jobs. My heart started pounding as I read it again, the threatening tone clear even though the actual words sounded almost polite. I grabbed my phone and took 3 screenshots of the message, making sure the timestamp and phone number showed clearly in each one. My hands shook while I opened my email and forwarded the screenshots to Detective Valentina with a subject line that said, "Urgent threatening message received." I typed out a quick explanation of when I got the text, and that I hadn't responded to the sender. The whole thing took maybe 2 minutes but felt like forever, because I kept looking at my doors and windows wondering if someone was watching my house right now. I turned on the porch light and checked that all the locks were secure, then went upstairs to make sure my daughter was asleep safely in her room. She was breathing peacefully with her stuffed bear tucked under one arm, completely unaware that someone had just tried to scare her mother into silence. I sat on the edge of her bed for a minute just watching her sleep and feeling angry that we were in this situation at all. Back downstairs, I made myself tea that I didn't really want, just needing something to do with my hands while I waited to see if Detective Valentina would respond tonight, or wait until morning. My phone rang at 8:15 the next morning while I was making breakfast. Detective Valentina's name showed on the screen and I answered immediately, my voice probably sounding more anxious than I meant it to. She told me she'd seen my email first thing this morning and wanted to give me some guidance about the threatening text. Her voice stayed calm and professional while she explained I should save any future messages, but never respond to them no matter how tempting it might be to defend myself. She said responding would only encourage more contact, and could make things worse. Then she asked if I'd checked my social media privacy settings recently, which I hadn't really thought about. She walked me through changing my settings to friends only on everything, and removing any posts that showed my address or regular locations like my gym or my daughter's school. She also told me to be careful about checking in places online or posting photos that might show where I was in real time. The whole conversation made me realize how much information I'd been sharing publicly without thinking about who might be watching. Detective Valentina said she'd try to trace the phone number from the text, but warned me it was probably a burner phone that wouldn't lead anywhere useful. Before hanging up, she reminded me to trust my instincts and call 911 immediately if I ever felt unsafe or saw anything suspicious around my house. I thanked her and ended the call, then spent the next hour going through every social media account I had and locking everything down. 2 days later, Detective Valentina called again with an update that actually sounded positive for once. The school's security office had finally provided footage from cameras near the apartment complex where Isaac had been hiding. The footage showed Isaac crouching behind the dumpster at 7:42 a.m., waiting for the bus to arrive, which proved he'd been deliberately staging there just like George said. The video caught Isaac checking around the corner nervously before running out to board the bus when it stopped. Detective Valentina said this confirmed George's entire story about the unauthorized pickup and showed Isaac was genuinely afraid of something. The footage also captured part of the parking lot where a dark blue sedan had been parked on 2 different mornings, though the angle wasn't good enough to see the driver clearly. She said this evidence backed up everything George had reported and proved Isaac wasn't just making up stories about being followed. I felt relieved hearing that George's account was validated with actual proof, instead of just witness statements that people could dismiss. Detective Valentina thanked me again for the dashcam footage I'd provided because it helped establish a pattern when combined with the school's security video. The next morning, Detective Valentina called me with news that made my stomach drop. She'd been analyzing my dashcam footage more carefully and ran the partial plate number through the system. The dark blue sedan matched a vehicle from the school district's pool car system that employees could check out for work purposes. She'd requested the sign-out logs and discovered the principal had checked out that specific car on multiple mornings that lined up exactly with the dates George reported seeing the stalking behavior. My hands went cold hearing this because it meant we had actual documented proof connecting the principal to the incidents. Detective Valentina's voice stayed measured and professional, but I could hear the significance in her tone when she explained this was the kind of concrete evidence that moved an investigation forward. She said the pool car records showed the principal signing out the vehicle at 6:30 a.m. on those mornings, which gave him plenty of time to be near the apartment complex before school started. The mileage logs also showed distances that matched driving from the school to Isaac's neighborhood and back. I asked what happened next, and she said she needed to request complete records from the district going back several months to establish a full pattern. She warned me this might take a few days because the district would probably push back on providing detailed information about an administrator. Detective Valentina called me 3 days later, sounding frustrated in a way I hadn't heard from her before. She'd formally requested complete pool car records from the district going back 6 months, which should have been a simple data pull from their electronic system. Instead, the district's legal office responded claiming their logging system had experienced technical issues over the past few months, and some data was incomplete or missing. Detective Valentina said this was a remarkably convenient excuse given the timing of her request. The district provided partial records, but claimed the electronic logs for several key dates had been corrupted or hadn't saved properly. She told me this kind of response made everyone involved more suspicious about whether someone at the district level was trying to protect the principal or cover up evidence. I asked if they could get the records through a court order, and she said they were already working on a subpoena, but that would take additional time and legal process. She sounded tired when she explained that institutional resistance like this was common in cases involving prominent community members. The district was probably more worried about liability and bad publicity than about finding the truth. I hung up feeling angry that bureaucracy and politics were slowing down an investigation into someone who might be targeting children. The following Tuesday, Detective Valentina told me that Mariah had completed the forensic interview with Isaac. The interview happened at a special facility designed to be comfortable for children, with trained specialists who knew how to ask questions without leading kids or traumatizing them further. Isaac described being followed by a man wearing a suit who smiled at him in a way that felt wrong and scary. He said the man knew his name, which terrified him because strangers aren't supposed to know your name unless they've been watching you. Isaac told Mariah the man had asked him questions about his family and where he lived, trying to sound friendly but making Isaac feel more afraid. That's when Isaac started hiding behind the dumpster every morning and waiting for George's bus instead of walking to the school like he used to. The interview was recorded and would be used as evidence if the case went to court. Detective Valentina said Isaac did really well answering questions, and his account stayed consistent throughout the interview, which was important for establishing credibility. She thanked me again for pushing this investigation forward, because without the parent group's documentation and George's testimony, Isaac's reports might have been dismissed as childhood imagination. Detective Valentina contacted the principal's office the next day, requesting a voluntary interview to ask about his whereabouts on specific dates. The principal showed up to the police station 2 days later with a lawyer sitting next to him the entire time. Detective Valentina asked him directly about being near the apartment complex on the mornings in question, and he denied ever following any student or being in that area. His lawyer jumped in frequently to clarify questions or advised the principal not to answer certain things. The principal claimed he couldn't remember exactly where he was on those specific dates since it was weeks ago, but insisted he would never do anything inappropriate involving students. He suggested maybe someone had seen a car similar to his, or misidentified him from a distance. When Detective Valentina asked about the pool car sign-out records, his lawyer said those records were incomplete and unreliable, as everyone at the district knew. The interview lasted about 40 minutes, and ended with the principal maintaining his innocence, while his lawyer warned against harassment of a respected educator. Detective Valentina told me later the interview went exactly as she expected, with the principal denying everything and hiding behind his lawyer. She said this was normal procedure and they hadn't really expected him to confess, but they needed his official statement on record for when they built the full case. 2 days later, I walked into the school at 1:30 to sign my daughter out early for a dentist appointment. The hallway smelled like floor cleaner and lunch leftovers, with kids' artwork covering the walls in bright colors. I headed toward the main office and turned the corner near the library when I almost ran straight into the principal. He stopped right in front of me, blocking the hallway, and my heart jumped into my throat seeing him up close. He smiled in that same friendly way I'd seen him use with kids in the parking lot, but something about it felt wrong when directed at me. He said he'd heard there were rumors going around about staff members, and wanted me to know that rumors can destroy careers and reputations. His voice stayed casual and conversational, like we were just chatting about the weather, but his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He mentioned how important it was for the school community to trust each other and not let gossip tear apart the relationships that made the school work. The whole time he talked, he stood just slightly too close. Not enough that I could call him out for it, but enough that I felt trapped in the hallway. I mumbled something about needing to get to the office and stepped around him, my legs feeling shaky as I walked away. He called after me to have a nice day in that same friendly tone, and I didn't look back. I sat in my car after picking up my daughter and called Detective Valentina immediately. My hands were still shaking while I described the hallway encounter and repeated everything the principal had said as exactly as I could remember. Detective Valentina listened carefully and asked specific questions about his exact words and body language. When I finished, she said the encounter wasn't technically threatening since he hadn't made any direct threats or done anything physical, but she advised me to avoid being alone with the principal anywhere and to document any future interactions in writing as soon as they happened. She said his behavior was clearly meant to intimidate me, even if his actual words sounded innocent. She told me to always bring another parent or staff member with me if I needed to go into the school, and to call her right away if he approached me again. I wrote down everything about the hallway encounter in my phone's notes app with the date and time while sitting in the dentist's parking lot, my daughter asking why I looked so upset. I told her everything was fine and we went inside for her appointment, but I kept replaying the principal's smile and his intense eye contact for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, I opened the parent online forum to check for any updates about the investigation. The entire page had exploded with arguments and accusations in the 6 hours since I last checked. One parent posted a long message defending the principal as a dedicated educator who volunteered at community events and coached youth soccer for years. Another parent responded that predators often build good reputations to hide their crimes and gain access to children. Someone else accused our group of ruining an innocent man's career based on flimsy evidence and paranoid speculation. I scrolled through dozens of comments calling us witch hunters and attention seekers who were tearing apart the school community over nothing. But mixed in with the hostile posts were other messages from parents sharing concerns they had dismissed before. One mother wrote about how the principal always seemed to show up at the playground during recess when her daughter's class was outside. Another parent mentioned the principal offered to give her son a ride home once when it was raining, which seemed nice at the time but felt wrong now. The forum split into two camps, arguing back and forth with increasing anger. I felt sick reading through all the posts and seeing how divided everyone had become over this situation. I closed the forum app and tried to focus on making dinner, but my hands shook while chopping vegetables. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Someone had posted my home address in the forum overnight with a comment about attention-seeking parents who destroy good people's lives. The post included a photo of my house taken from the street and a suggestion that maybe I needed to understand what it felt like to be targeted. I immediately locked down all my social media accounts and changed my privacy settings to the highest level. Chloe called me at 7 a.m. to say the same thing happened to her, with her address and workplace posted in the forum, along with accusations about her stirring up trouble. We spent an hour on the phone going through every account we had and making sure nothing was publicly visible anymore. I reported the threatening post to the forum moderators and took screenshots of everything before the post got deleted. Detective Valentina called back within 2 hours of my report and said this kind of doxing was taken seriously, especially in an ongoing investigation. She advised us to document any suspicious activity around our homes and to call 911 immediately if anyone showed up or made direct threats. I installed a security camera on my front porch that afternoon, using my phone to monitor the feed. The whole situation felt surreal, like I was living in some crime drama instead of just trying to protect kids in my daughter's school. My daughter woke up screaming 3 nights in a row that week. She dreamed about bad men following her to the school and hiding behind corners waiting to grab her. I sat on her bed each night holding her while she cried and told me she was scared to go anywhere. The nightmares started right after she overheard me talking to Chloe about the forum posts and the address posting. I realized she was picking up on all the stress and fear even when I tried to hide it from her. That morning, I decided to keep driving her to the school myself instead of putting her back on the bus. The drive added 40 minutes to my morning routine and another 40 in the afternoon, and I was already exhausted from missing work and dealing with everything. But watching my daughter's face relax when I told her I would drive her every day made the inconvenience worth it. Her sense of safety mattered more than my schedule or what other parents thought about my choices. Some parents in the parking lot gave me cold looks during drop-off, probably thinking I was one of the troublemakers causing drama. I ignored them and focused on walking my daughter to her classroom door and making sure she felt secure. The police increased their patrol presence near the school, and bus stops starting that week. I saw marked patrol cars driving slowly past the school during morning drop-off and afternoon pickup. Officers walked through the parking lot and stood near the bus loading area watching everything. The dark blue sedan that had been following the bus route stopped appearing in the area completely. I felt a wave of relief the first few days when I didn't see it during my drives around the neighborhood. But the relief mixed with frustration because I knew the principal was just being more careful now that police were watching. He hadn't stopped being dangerous. He just stopped being visible. Detective Valentina confirmed the increased patrols were intentional to both protect the children and potentially catch the principal if he tried anything. She said predators often can't help themselves and might make a mistake if they felt confident enough. The patrols continued for 2 weeks and became a normal part of the school routine, which felt both comforting and disturbing at the same time. Chloe called me on a Thursday afternoon sounding excited and worried at once. A parent from a different elementary school across town had contacted her through a mutual friend. The parent said her son mentioned a man in a suit trying to talk to him near the park last week. The man asked the boy his name and what school he went to, then commented on his backpack and asked if he walked home alone. The boy felt scared and ran to find his mom, and when he described the man, she thought it sounded like someone official from the school district. Chloe sent me a photo the parent had taken of the park area and asked if I recognized the location. I didn't know that neighborhood well, but the description of the man matched the principal exactly. Chloe forwarded everything to Detective Valentina immediately along with the other parent's contact information. Detective Valentina called the parent that same day to get a formal statement and add this incident to the growing pattern of evidence. She told Chloe this was exactly the kind of information they needed because it showed the principal's behavior wasn't limited to one school or one child. The pattern was expanding and becoming harder to dismiss as coincidence or misunderstanding. Chloe spent the next few days reaching out to everyone she could think of who might help push the school district to be more transparent. She contacted Joel Duncan, an aide to a city council member who had kids in the district and cared about education issues. Joel agreed to meet with Chloe at a coffee shop downtown to hear about the situation. Chloe brought copies of all our documentation, including the timeline of events, the parent statements, and the photos we had collected. Joel listened carefully and took notes, asking specific questions about the district's response and what policies were in place for reporting safety concerns. He said he would look into the district's procedures for administrative leave and how they handled investigations involving staff members. Joel promised to talk to the council member about whether there were any oversight gaps that needed addressing. Chloe called me after the meeting feeling hopeful that we might finally get some outside pressure on the district to take this seriously. She said Joel seemed genuinely concerned and had connections that could make a difference if he chose to get involved. I felt grateful that Chloe had the energy and skills to navigate these political connections because I was barely keeping my own life together. Detective Valentina worked on securing a court order for GPS and geofence data from the pool car system. She explained the legal process required showing probable cause that the data would contain evidence of a crime. She submitted detailed affidavits including George's testimony, Isaac's statements, my dashcam footage, and the new report from the other school's parent. The judge reviewed everything and issued a limited order for specific dates and geographic areas. The whole process took several days and felt agonizingly slow while we waited for results. Detective Valentina called me twice during the wait to reassure me that these things took time and the delay was normal for legal procedures. She said rushing the process could result in evidence getting thrown out later if the case went to trial. I understood the reasoning, but every day that passed felt like another day the principal could hurt someone. Chloe organized a group text to keep everyone updated on the court order status. Parents checked in constantly asking if there was any news yet. The waiting created a tense atmosphere where everyone felt stuck between hope and frustration. The GPS data finally came back and Detective Valentina called me with the results. The pool car's location history showed it was near the bus route and apartment complex on multiple mornings when the principal had signed it out. The timestamps matched exactly when George reported seeing the stalking behavior and when Isaac was hiding behind the dumpster. Detective Valentina said this was significant evidence because it placed the principal in the specific locations at the specific times when the stalking was occurring. The data also showed the car near the park where the other parent reported the incident with her son. She explained that GPS evidence was powerful in court because it was objective and hard to dispute. The principal's lawyer would have trouble explaining why he was repeatedly in these locations during school hours when he should have been at his office. Detective Valentina said they were building a strong circumstantial case even without direct video footage of the principal talking to children. I felt a surge of validation hearing that our observations and documentation were leading to real evidence. Chloe cried when I called to tell her the news because we had been fighting for weeks to be taken seriously. The school district sent an email to all parents the next morning. The subject line read, "Administrative Personnel Update," and I opened it immediately with my heart pounding. The email announced that the principal was placed on administrative leave pending an ongoing investigation. It provided no details about the nature of the investigation or how long the leave would last. The message emphasized that the district took all safety concerns seriously and was cooperating fully with appropriate authorities. It ended with a reminder that spreading unverified information could have legal consequences, and everyone should respect the privacy of all involved. I read the email 3 times trying to find any real information between the corporate language. My phone exploded with messages from other parents within minutes of the email going out. Some parents celebrated that the principal was finally removed from daily contact with children. Others posted angry messages demanding to know what was really happening and why the district was being so secretive. The school community erupted with speculation and rumors about what the investigation involved. Parents who had defended the principal started questioning whether they had been wrong. Parents who had attacked our group stayed quiet or doubled down on claims we had ruined an innocent man's career. The division in the community deepened even as some progress finally happened. I sat at my kitchen table reading the email again and felt a careful sense of relief wash over me. The principal no longer had daily access to children, which meant Isaac and my daughter and all the other kids were safer than they had been yesterday. But I knew administrative leave wasn't the same as being arrested or charged with a crime. He was still free to go wherever he wanted outside of school property. Detective Valentina called me that afternoon to discuss the district's announcement. She warned us the investigation still had a long way to go before any charges could be filed. The GPS evidence was strong, but they needed more to build a prosecutable case that would hold up in court. She said administrative leave was a good step, but we couldn't let our guard down or assume the danger was over. I promised to stay vigilant and keep documenting anything unusual. My daughter asked that evening if the bad man was gone now, and I had to explain that he wasn't at the school anymore. But the police were still working to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone. She seemed satisfied with that answer and slept better that night than she had in weeks. I stayed awake long after she fell asleep, staring at my phone and wondering how much longer this would take before we could all feel truly safe again. Campus security arrived at the school the next morning with a warrant to search the principal's office and the pool car he had been using. I heard about it from Chloe, who texted our parent group with updates as they came in. The search took 3 hours, and security officers carried out several boxes of materials. Later that afternoon, Detective Valentina called me to share what they found. Inside the principal's desk drawer was a spiral notebook filled with handwritten notes about bus schedules and route maps. The notebook included specific times that matched exactly when Isaac was picked up at the apartment complex. There were also notes about which streets the bus traveled and what time it passed certain landmarks. Detective Valentina said this showed clear planning and surveillance of the bus route, which supported the stalking charges they were building. The pool car search turned up nothing visible, but they were sending it to the crime lab for forensic analysis. I felt my stomach turn hearing about the notebook, because it proved the principal had been actively tracking Isaac's movements. This wasn't some misunderstanding or coincidence. He had been planning something and documenting everything carefully. That evening, my phone rang again, and Detective Valentina's name appeared on the screen. She told me they had executed a search warrant at the principal's home earlier that day. My hands started shaking before she even told me what they found. Inside a locked desk drawer in his home office was an SD card containing hundreds of digital photos. The photos showed children taken from a distance near the school and around the apartment complex. Many of the images were of Isaac specifically, taken at different times over several weeks. Some showed him walking alone, others showed him near the dumpster where he used to hide before the bus came. Detective Valentina said the photos were taken with a telephoto lens from far enough away that the children wouldn't have noticed. She explained this type of surveillance photography was strong evidence of stalking behavior and predatory intent. The timestamps on the photos matched the dates when the principal had signed out the pool car. I sat down on my kitchen floor after hanging up because my legs felt too weak to hold me. The reality of how close Isaac had come to real danger made me feel sick. The principal was arrested the next morning at his home on charges of stalking and attempted child luring. The police department issued a press advisory about the arrest, and it made the local news by noon. My phone absolutely exploded with text messages and calls from other parents who were shocked and horrified. Some parents who had defended the principal and criticized our investigation sent apologetic messages. Others just wanted to know if their own children were safe, or if there were more victims. The news showed footage of the principal being led out of his house in handcuffs and loaded into a police car. His face looked blank and emotionless, which somehow made it even more disturbing. The news report mentioned the investigation was ongoing and asked anyone with information to contact the police department. Our school was specifically named in the coverage, which meant everyone in town now knew what had happened. Parents from other schools started calling the district office demanding to know if their principals had been vetted properly. The whole situation exploded into a community crisis that went way beyond just our school. I sat on the couch that evening with my daughter and turned on the local news. She needed to understand what was happening in age-appropriate terms before she heard it from other kids at the school. The news showed the principal's arrest again, and I explained that the police had arrested someone who was trying to hurt kids. I told her the scary man who was following Isaac was caught and wouldn't be able to hurt anyone now. My daughter looked relieved, but also confused about why a principal would do something like that. I tried to explain that sometimes people who seem nice and safe can actually be dangerous, which is why we have rules about stranger danger and telling adults when something feels wrong. Then she asked if George could come back to drive the bus now since the bad man was caught. I promised her we would try to make that happen, and that George was a hero for protecting Isaac even when it got him in trouble. She seemed satisfied with that answer and hugged me tight before going to play in her room. I stayed on the couch feeling exhausted from having to explain such dark realities to a 9-year-old child. The school district sent an email the next day, announcing the school would be closed for 2 days for staff safety training and counseling support. The message said teachers and staff needed time to process what had happened and access mental health resources. I understood the reasoning because finding out a coworker is a predator must be devastating for people who worked with him every day. Chloe organized a parent coffee meetup at a local cafe so we could talk about everything that happened. About 20 parents showed up and everyone looked tired and stressed, Some teachers came too, and they seemed genuinely shaken by the whole situation. One teacher told us she had worked with the principal for 5 years and never suspected anything wrong. She felt guilty for not noticing warning signs, even though there probably weren't any obvious ones to notice. The whole community felt betrayed and scared because someone in a trusted position had been secretly dangerous the entire time. Parents worried about whether their kids had been photographed or followed without anyone knowing. The 2-day closure gave everyone time to process and talk, but it didn't make the fear go away completely. Edward Steele contacted the district on George's behalf to negotiate his employment status. George had been on administrative leave without pay for weeks, and his family was struggling financially. Edward argued that George's actions had directly protected a child from a dangerous predator, and the district should recognize that rather than punish him. The district's legal team pushed back, saying George still violated policy by making unauthorized stops and failing to report through proper channels. After several days of negotiation, they reached a compromise. George's discipline would be reduced to a short suspension without pay instead of termination. He would be allowed to return to work, but on a different bus route away from our school. The district wanted to avoid the publicity of firing someone who had protected a child from their own principal. George accepted the terms, even though it felt unfair that he was punished at all. I thought it was a bittersweet outcome because George kept his job but still faced consequences for doing the right thing. Edward told me later that George just wanted to move forward and support his family without more legal battles. A few days after the arrest, the school district's legal team sent formal letters to several parents, including me. The letter warned against making public statements that could be considered defamatory toward the district or its employees. It reminded us that the legal case was ongoing, and premature statements could interfere with the judicial process. The threatening tone of the letter made me angry because we had only shared facts about what happened. I called a friend who works as a lawyer and asked her to review the letter. She explained I was protected by truth as a defense against defamation, as long as I stuck to facts I could prove. She advised me to avoid speculating about things I didn't know for certain, and to be careful about social media posts. I decided to stop posting in the online parent forums anyway, because I didn't want to deal with legal threats on top of everything else. The district was clearly trying to control the narrative and limit their liability, rather than supporting the parents who had protected children. I sat down with my daughter for a long, serious conversation about the kids' pact to protect George and why they had been so scared to tell adults. She explained that the older kids on the bus had convinced everyone the adults would blame George and get him fired if they found out about Isaac. The kids thought they were protecting both George and Isaac by keeping the secret. I told her I understood why she felt torn, but explained that some secrets are dangerous to keep. We established clear safety rules about what kinds of secrets are okay, like surprise birthday parties, and which ones always need to be shared with parents, like anything involving adults asking kids to hide things or anyone feeling scared or unsafe. My daughter nodded seriously and promised she would always tell me if something felt wrong, even if someone asked her to keep it secret. I emphasized that she had done the right thing by eventually telling me the truth, and that George wasn't in trouble because of her. We practiced different scenarios where she might need to break a promise to stay safe. The conversation was hard but necessary because I needed her to understand the difference between loyalty and danger. Imogen called me the following week to tell me she had decided to transfer Isaac to a different school with support from CPS. She thanked our parent group for protecting her grandson and said she would always be grateful we took the threat seriously. But Isaac was having nightmares and anxiety about going back to the school where everything happened. He needed a fresh start somewhere without constant reminders of being stalked and scared. CPS helped arrange the transfer to a school in a different district with additional counseling services for Isaac. Imogen said Isaac was relieved to be starting over where nobody knew his story. I completely understood her decision, even though it meant Isaac wouldn't be riding George's bus anymore. The whole point had been to keep Isaac safe, and if a new school helped him feel secure, then that was the right choice. I wished them well and promised to stay in touch. Imogen sent a thank you card to our parent group the next week with a photo of Isaac smiling at his new school. The school district held a press conference to announce new bus safety measures being implemented immediately. Every bus would now have a second adult monitor riding along to supervise and ensure driver accountability. Parents would receive access to GPS tracking links showing real-time bus locations during routes. All route information would be published transparently on the district website, with maps and schedules available to parents. The district superintendent gave a speech about prioritizing child safety and learning from this situation to improve systems. I watched the press conference online and felt glad these changes were happening, but also frustrated they hadn't existed before. These measures seemed obvious and should have been standard policy all along. Chloe posted in our parent group that we should celebrate this progress while staying vigilant about implementation. Several parents volunteered to serve on a new safety advisory committee the district was forming. The changes felt like a small victory after weeks of fighting to be heard and taken seriously about our children's safety. A few days later, Detective Valentina called with news I wasn't ready to hear. She explained the prosecutor's office had concerns about proving attempted luring beyond reasonable doubt in court. The evidence showed stalking behavior clearly, but proving intent to actually take Isaac was harder than I thought. The photos and GPS data proved the principal followed Isaac, but his lawyer would argue he was just checking on a student's welfare or investigating truancy. Detective Valentina said we might end up with a plea deal to lesser charges like stalking or harassment instead of attempted kidnapping. I felt frustrated because I knew what the principal was doing, but the legal system needed more proof than my gut feeling. She reminded me that stalking charges still meant serious consequences and would keep him away from children, which was the main goal. I thanked her for being honest about the reality, instead of giving me false hope about a perfect outcome. 3 weeks after the arrest, the principal's arraignment finally happened at the county courthouse. The judge issued no contact orders for all the children involved, including my daughter and Isaac. The principal posted bail the same day, which made my stomach turn, but the conditions were strict. He had to wear a GPS monitor on his ankle, stay at least 500 feet away from any school or park, and check in with a probation officer twice a week. I told myself the monitoring meant he couldn't get near kids without immediate arrest, but I still hated knowing he was out walking around. Chloe texted our parent group with updates from the courthouse, and everyone expressed the same mix of relief and worry. At least the legal system was taking it seriously, even if the process moved slower than we wanted. George returned to work the following Monday on a completely different bus route across town. Edward told me the district assigned him to a route with older middle school students instead of elementary kids. Some parents from other schools actually requested George specifically after hearing the news stories about how he protected Isaac. They saw him as a hero who put a child's safety above rules and bureaucracy. But other parents remained uncomfortable with his rule breaking regardless of his good intentions. They worried about what other rules he might bend or break in the future. I understood both perspectives, even though I firmly believed George did the right thing. Edward said George just wanted to move forward and do his job without more attention or drama. Our parent group established a safety watch schedule where volunteers took turns monitoring school arrival and dismissal times. Chloe created a shared calendar and sent out weekly reminders to everyone who signed up. Parents would stand near the bus loop and main entrance during drop-off and pickup, just being visible and aware. It gave everyone something productive to do with our worry instead of just sitting at home feeling anxious. The extra eyes created another layer of protection for the kids and made the school staff more careful too. I took Tuesday and Thursday morning shifts because those fit my work schedule best. Standing there watching the buses arrive felt better than pacing around my kitchen imagining worst-case scenarios. My household routine slowly stabilized as the immediate crisis passed and daily life returned to something closer to normal. But I was completely exhausted from weeks of stress and the financial hit from missing work to deal with everything. I had used up all my paid time off following the bus, meeting with police, and attending district meetings. My daughter seemed more settled now that she saw adults taking real action to fix the problem. She stopped having nightmares about scary men and started sleeping through the night again. We fell back into our regular morning routine of breakfast and backpack checks without the constant underlying tension. I still felt tired all the time, but at least the panic and fear had faded to manageable background worry. Some parents still avoided me and the others who pushed hard for the investigation. They treated us like we caused unnecessary drama instead of protecting children from a real threat. At the school pickup, they would turn away or suddenly become very interested in their phones when I walked past. A few parents stopped responding to my texts in the class parent group chat. The social rifts in the school community would take a long time to heal if they ever did. I tried not to take it personally, but it hurt to be treated like a troublemaker when I was just trying to keep kids safe. Chloe said those parents would eventually realize we did the right thing, but I wasn't sure that day would ever come. The district announced a new anonymous reporting channel for safety concerns through an outside company that wasn't connected to the school administration. They also made it mandatory for all drivers and staff to complete training on recognizing grooming behaviors and predatory patterns. The superintendent sent an email explaining these changes were part of their commitment to child safety and learning from recent events. I felt cautiously optimistic that some good came from this nightmare situation. Maybe future kids would be safer because we spoke up and refused to back down. The changes felt inadequate compared to what we went through, but they were better than nothing. I committed to staying vigilant about my daughter's safety without becoming paranoid or overprotective. I wouldn't turn into a helicopter parent who monitored her every move and never let her out of my sight. I also wouldn't crusade to reform the entire school system or become some kind of child safety activist. But I would absolutely speak up immediately if I ever saw something concerning again. I would trust my instincts instead of talking myself out of worry because I didn't want to cause problems. I would ask questions and demand real answers instead of accepting vague reassurances from authority figures. My daughter deserved a mother who protected her while still letting her grow up and experience the world. This morning, the bus takes its expected route with a safety monitor visible in the back window wearing an orange vest. My daughter boards with confidence, waving goodbye before finding her usual seat. I watch until the bus turns the corner 3 blocks away, feeling a workable sense of peace. We did everything we could to protect the children in our community. The principal faces legal consequences and can't access schools anymore. George kept his job despite breaking rules to help a scared kid. The district made real changes to prevent future problems. My daughter learned important lessons about safety and speaking up when something feels wrong. Nothing about this situation was perfect or easy, but we made it through together. I turn and walk back to my car, ready to face whatever comes next. And that's how it went down for me. Now I'm curious. What's your take on it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading through them. You always spot things I miss.